Hello, my name is Ian Currey and this is Thinking Out Loud. Sometimes there's a longer gap between these videos than I'd like. Sometimes my work schedule ends up with everything happening one thing on top of the other. Making videos, and lots of other fun things, have to go on hold for a while. When things get busy and you have to set priorities, cut things out or just run on autopilot for a while, it's always interesting to see where the autopilot takes you. Come on, let me tell you what I think. Did you know that cars in America get fewer miles to the gallon than they do in England? No? It's true. The car I drive to work every day gets a lovely 32 miles to the gallon. But in England, the same car would get around 38 miles to the gallon. How is that possible? Whatever could be the magic? Running out of petrol, or gas as they call it here, is something some of us run the risk of doing regularly. I sometimes jump into the car and realize I need to fill up, but at 4 o'clock in the morning when I'm thinking of going to work, the petrol stations aren't open. And when I'm on my way home, I'm thinking about what's for tea and not filling up the car. Even at a lovely 32 miles to the gallon, I still use almost a full gallon on the journey and eventually have to stop and fill up. I've often wondered how far I'd get coasting. There's a lovely long gentle hill from about halfway home on that interstate that would probably allow me to roll into the gas station at my exit, but I really don't want to try it. Some of us love to push the limits, knowing we have 20 miles or so once that little light comes on, and that's enough. I can easily drive for over a week without needing to fill up, usually. Oh, and the reason my car would get more miles to the gallon in England is that gallons there are about 20% bigger. It's one of the few things I can think of that's actually bigger in England than here in the United States. Running on fumes, as we call it, when the tank seems unreasonably empty, triggers several things, doesn't it? In life as well as driving. And we will focus more on where the next refill is coming from rather than much else. My car almost knows its own way home, so I wouldn't be thinking about that. The other day I had my car repaired and hadn't driven it in the dark after its visit to the repair shop. I jumped in the car that next morning at 4:30 in the morning, as I always do, drove a little way down the street, and off went the lights. It was so very dark, and although there was a lovely full moon, I stopped quickly since around here I'd be likely to run into a deer or something without my lights on. The issue was quickly resolved. There's an automatic setting on the light switch that had not been reset properly. So pressing that switch put the lights right back on again. But it made me think. I really do know that road very well, and there's hardly ever anything on it. But without lights, well, that's a whole different thing. I knew there was a bend coming and would have tended to turn the right way, but still, even though I know the road, know where to go without thinking, I still need help from the lights. Getting up so early when I'm heading to work means I have to adjust things I would like to do to other times. On top of spending time in simulators and training facilities, I also still fly, of course, and recently I've been clocking up the flying I need to stay qualified to do my job. The longer haul flights from here to Europe are perhaps my favourite at this time of year. Now, Hilary was very jealous when I flew to Dublin recently and had enough time to hike around Howth Head one lovely sunny afternoon. What an amazing place. And yes, those are crazy people jumping off the cliffs into the seaway down there. Fun. But, I think I'll stick to walking. Rome next, and a lovely walk to see the city after dark. I love the preserved history there, but sitting eating a sandwich looking at the Colosseum beautifully lit made me think. A tourist attraction for sure, but I can't help thinking about the many would have died there in that particular building all those years ago. The following trip gave me a chance to see Tower Bridge wide open. We all know it does that, but all the way up these days, that's rare enough to have even the locals stop and look. With such a busy schedule, how do you keep on top of life? I mean, it's all well and good zooming all over the world, coming home to go to bed for a few hours before being back at it at 4 in the morning the next day. But how do you fill your tank? After a busy day, I just want to sleep. But I noticed, reading the other day, that Jesus also had busy days, and his solution was a bit different to some of his followers. Before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. Later, Simon and the others went to find him. When they found him, they said, "Everyone is looking for you." I noticed a few things about these seemingly mundane sentences. Before daybreak the next morning, I tried to imagine what it would be like. The lights on my car being off made me think of Jesus wandering around in the dark. He must have been there before, or he wouldn't have known where to go. The isolated place must not have been an unfamiliar place. I love too that the others were out looking for him. I expect once they woke up, they would have realized Jesus wasn't there. These are far more my kind of people, sleeping a little longer to try to catch up for a busy day that way. I wonder if it was Jesus' turn to cook breakfast and they were hungry. That conversation would have been interesting. We thought you were making breakfast, and then we'd go into town and meet everybody again. And if you slip that thought in there, when Jesus replies, we must go to other towns as well, and I'll preach to them. That's why I came. That idea of setting time aside to be alone and refill is vital. But you may notice that not all the disciples, the followers, were out there with Jesus. He was alone. They only missed him after they managed to wake up. Personally, the idea of there being 2 4 o'clocks in one day is quite bad enough. Without having to think of doing anything more than find my way to work is quite enough for me. I identify more with Simon and the others who went out later to find Jesus. He'll still be there, I'm sure. But taking time to make sure we do indeed recharge, get time alone, think, pray, and especially ensure our walk with God is tight is so very important. Skipping a couple of videos or perhaps a few hours with hobbies or so on showed me where my priorities really are. When we have a schedule that drives us to the almost empty place, knowing what that road looks like and finding the secluded place automatically and actually keeping an eye on our reserve tank is of course important. Being off for a few days after such a busy time makes me remember and look forward to a visit to somewhere quiet and alone. Until next time, goodbye.